Hello. Ethan and Mia were the epitome of the perfect couple, or so it seemed. Married for 7 years, they lived in a picturesque suburban home, complete with a white picket fence and a golden retriever named Max. Ethan was a successful architect, known for his sharp intellect and meticulous nature. Mia, a former art gallery curator, now spent her days volunteering at community events and running her small photography business. Their lives were a blend of routine and comfort, filled with quiet dinners, weekend hikes, and late-night talks that seemed to hold their bond together. But beneath the surface, Mia felt trapped. The excitement that once fueled their relationship had dulled over time. Ethan's focus on his work often left her feeling invisible, and the monotony of her own life weighed heavily on her soul. One evening, as they hosted their weekly dinner for friends, Ryan, Ethan's business partner and oldest friend, caught Mia's eye in a way he never had before. Ryan, with his easy charm and rugged good looks, was the opposite of Ethan's reserved and calculated demeanor. His laughter filled the room, and the way he looked at Mia that night was different, intense, electric. Mia quickly dismissed the thought, chastising herself for even entertaining such an idea. But as the night wore on, she couldn't ignore the butterflies in her stomach when Ryan casually brushed her hand while reaching for the wine. It was a fleeting moment, but it planted a dangerous seed in her mind, one that would grow into something neither Ethan nor Mia could ever have anticipated. The perfect facade of their marriage was about to crack, but neither of them could see it coming yet. The following days were a blur of restlessness for Mia. She couldn't shake the memory of Ryan's touch or the way his gaze lingered just a moment too long. It wasn't love, it wasn't even infatuation, but it was something she hadn't felt in years, desired. Ethan, as usual, was consumed by work. Late nights at the office and early mornings filled with calls left little room for Mia in his life. She told herself it wasn't his fault. He was ambitious, driven, and providing the life they had always dreamed of. Yet, as she sat alone at the kitchen table one evening, the emptiness in the house felt louder than ever. Ryan's messages started innocently enough. A thank you text for dinner that night. A comment about how great she looked. Casual, harmless. But the frequency increased, and so did the intimacy of their conversations. Soon, Ryan was sending her jokes to make her laugh, asking about her day in a way that Ethan rarely did anymore. Mia knew she was crossing a line, but the thrill was intoxicating. She justified it to herself. It was just texts, just words. She convinced herself it wasn't hurting anyone. Yet, deep down, she felt the danger in the way her heart raced whenever her phone buzzed. Then came the moment she couldn't ignore. Ryan suggested they meet for coffee. To talk, he said. His tone was light, but the implication was heavy. Mia hesitated, staring at her phone as her heart pounded in her chest. She typed out a response, deleted it and typed again. Finally, she hit send. Sure. Tomorrow at 3. The seed had taken root, and there was no turning back now. The next day, Mia dressed with unusual care. Her outfit was casual enough not to draw suspicion but carefully chosen to accentuate her best features. She told herself it was just coffee, just a conversation. Yet her reflection in the mirror betrayed her anticipation. They met at a quaint cafe tucked away from the main streets, the kind of place where nobody they knew would stumble upon them. Ryan was already there, waiting at a corner table with 2 steaming cups of coffee. When he looked up and saw her, his smile was warm and inviting, but his eyes carried a flicker of something more, something dangerous. They started with small talk, her photography projects, his recent work at the firm with Ethan. But the undercurrent of tension was undeniable. Every laugh, every glance, every accidental touch of hands as they reached for their cups sent shivers through Mia. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. After an hour, Ryan leaned in, his voice low. You know, Mia, there's something about you, something I can't stop thinking about. His words hung in the air, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Mia's breath caught. She knew this was the point of no return, the moment she could either pull back or let herself fall. But the thrill of his attention, the way he made her feel seen, was too intoxicating to resist. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what are you thinking right now?" Ryan smirked, his eyes locking onto hers. "That I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." Their hands brushed again, this time deliberately. Mia's heart raced as she realized she had already made her decision long before this meeting. It was a dangerous game, but she was ready to play. What started as a single coffee meeting quickly escalated into something neither Mia nor Ryan could control. Their stolen moments became frequent, cloaked in secrecy and tinged with guilt. A sudden business lunch here, an evening walk there. They told themselves it was harmless, but the electric charge between them betrayed their true intentions. One evening, Ryan suggested they meet at a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. "Just to talk in private," he had said, his tone casual but his meaning clear. Mia hesitated for hours before finally agreeing. Her hands shook as she texted Ethan that she'd be working late on a photography project, a lie that left a bitter taste in her mouth. The hotel room was simple but elegant, its dim lighting adding to the intimacy of the moment. Ryan was waiting for her, his expression a mix of excitement and hesitation. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, the tension became unbearable. "You're sure about this?" Ryan asked, stepping closer. Mia nodded, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to think anymore." And with that, they crossed the line they'd been tiptoeing around for weeks. The connection was raw and overwhelming, a cocktail of passion and forbidden excitement. For the first time in years, Mia felt free, untethered from the monotony of her carefully constructed life. But as she lay next to Ryan afterward, staring at the ceiling, reality began to creep in. The weight of what she had done settled heavily on her chest. She thought of Ethan, his trust, his loyalty, his quiet love for her. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Ryan kissed her shoulder and whispered, "I've never felt like this before." Mia turned to him, forcing a smile. "Me neither." But even as she said the words, a sliver of unease wormed its way into her heart. She knew this was only the beginning of something far darker than she had anticipated. Mia returned home that night to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, working on blueprints. He looked up and smiled as she walked in, the same familiar smile that had once made her feel so safe. But now it only heightened her guilt. "How was your photography project?" Ethan asked casually, not even looking up from his work. "It was fine," Mia replied, her voice too light, too rehearsed. She kissed him on the cheek and went upstairs, her heart pounding. The lies were starting to pile up, and she could feel their weight pressing down on her. Over the next few weeks, Mia and Ryan's affair deepened. They met in hidden corners of the city, shared stolen kisses, and exchanged texts late into the night. But the thrill was beginning to wane for Mia, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Every time she saw Ethan, she felt his unspoken trust like a knife in her chest. Ethan, ever perceptive, began to notice the changes. Mia was more distracted, her phone always close at hand. She laughed less and avoided his touch. But Ethan, pragmatic to a fault, convinced himself it was just a rough patch. He tried to reconnect, planning a surprise dinner, suggesting a weekend trip, but Mia always had an excuse. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Ethan finally voiced his concerns. "Is everything okay with us?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. Mia froze, her mind racing. "Of course," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Why would you think otherwise?" Ethan studied her face for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I don't know. You just seem different lately." Mia deflected with practiced ease, changing the subject and avoiding his gaze. But Ethan wasn't convinced. The cracks in their marriage were widening, and while Mia was too consumed by her guilt and passion to see it, Ethan was starting to piece things together. Quietly, methodically, he began to watch her more closely, determined to uncover the truth. Ethan's instincts wouldn't let him rest. He had always trusted Mia, but the changes in her behavior gnawed at him like a splinter in his mind. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he began observing her more closely. Not accusing, but watching. The first clue came one evening when Mia left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. A message from Ryan popped up. "Same place tomorrow? Can't stop thinking about you." Ethan's heart sank as he read the words. His first reaction was disbelief, followed quickly by a rush of anger. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was staring him in the face. Instead of confronting her immediately, Ethan decided to dig deeper. He needed to know the extent of her betrayal. Over the next few days, he began checking her phone when she wasn't looking, piecing together a trail of messages, photos, and locations. Every discovery felt like a dagger to his heart, but he kept going, fueled by a growing need for answers and revenge. One evening, while Mia was out, Ethan accessed the location-sharing app they both had on their phones. He saw her marked at a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. His stomach churned. There was no photography project, no volunteer work, just another lie. Ethan drove to the hotel, parking a distance away to avoid being seen. He waited for nearly 2 hours until Mia emerged, hand in hand with Ryan. The sight was a cruel confirmation of his worst fears. They laughed together, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the betrayal cutting deeper with every passing second. As they drove off, he stayed in his car, his mind racing. Confrontation wasn't enough. He needed something more, something that would make them feel the pain they had caused him. That night, Ethan began formulating a plan. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about dismantling their lives, piece by piece. Ethan spent the following days meticulously plotting his revenge. He knew he couldn't act impulsively. His retaliation needed to be precise, devastating, and inescapable. He began by researching every detail about Ryan's life. His financials, secrets he had confided during late-night drinks, and vulnerabilities Ethan had never thought to exploit before. Mia, meanwhile, was oblivious. She continued her affair with Ryan, unaware that Ethan had seen everything. Ethan played his part flawlessly, acting as if nothing had changed. He cooked dinners, asked about her day, and even made plans for a weekend getaway, all while silently setting his trap. The first step in his plan involved Ryan's career. Ethan and Ryan co-owned their architectural firm, a thriving business built over years of hard work. Ethan began siphoning money from accounts Ryan had limited access to, ensuring the discrepancies would point directly back to him. He also planted subtle evidence of embezzlement, fake invoices, altered contracts, all with Ryan's name tied to them. The second step was Mia. Ethan started leaving subtle clues around the house that he knew about her infidelity. A misplaced photo of her and Ryan on her phone, a copy of the hotel receipt tucked into her wallet. Each discovery made her paranoid, but Ethan played dumb, watching as her guilt grew with each passing day. Then, he began isolating her emotionally. He stopped initiating conversations, his affection now mechanical and cold. Mia noticed the change but couldn't bring herself to confront him. She was too wrapped up in her own web of lies to face the truth. Ethan's final step was to set the stage for the perfect confrontation. He planted a recording device in the hotel room where Mia and Ryan often met, gathering undeniable evidence of their betrayal. The recordings were painful to listen to, but they solidified his resolve. He was no longer the man who would suffer in silence. With every piece of the puzzle in place, Ethan was ready to strike. His revenge would be swift, calculated, and merciless. Neither Mia nor Ryan would see it coming. Ethan chose the perfect moment to set his plan into motion. A Friday evening, when Ryan was hosting a dinner party at his home with close friends and colleagues. Mia was attending, having told Ethan she was spending the evening with her photography group. Unbeknownst to both of them, Ethan had already arranged for the night to take a disastrous turn. He arrived at Ryan's house an hour into the party, calm and collected, carrying a folder filled with the damning evidence he had gathered. As he stepped into the lively room, conversations faltered, and all eyes turned to him. Ryan's smile froze on his face as he saw Ethan. Mia, standing by the bar with a glass of wine, paled visibly, her hand trembling as she set the glass down. "Ethan," Ryan stammered, attempting to mask his unease. I didn't know you'd be stopping by. Ethan smiled coolly, his gaze shifting to Mia. I wasn't planning on it, but I realized there's something we all need to discuss. The room fell silent as Ethan walked to the center of the room, pulling out the folder. He laid it on the coffee table and looked around, his voice steady but cutting. Ryan and I have been business partners for years, and I thought I could trust him. Turns out I was wrong. He's been stealing, from me, from the firm, and from my marriage. Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan opened the folder, revealing forged documents implicating Ryan in embezzlement, alongside printed copies of messages between Ryan and Mia. At the top of the pile was a photograph of them leaving the hotel together. Ryan's face turned ashen as he stammered, Ethan, this isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. Ethan interrupted, his voice cold. He turned to the stunned crowd. I trusted him like a brother, and this is how he repaid me. Mia's voice broke the silence. Ethan, please. Don't. Ethan snapped, his icy glare silencing her. You made your choice, Mia. The room was tense with disbelief and judgment as Ethan walked out, leaving the damning evidence behind for everyone to see. His first strike had landed, and the cracks in Mia and Ryan's lives were beginning to spread. But Ethan wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning of their unraveling. The fallout from Ethan's confrontation was swift and brutal. By the following morning, whispers of Ryan's betrayal had spread like wildfire. Their social circle, once tight-knit and supportive, turned on him with a vengeance. Clients began pulling their projects from the firm, wary of being associated with an alleged embezzler. Ryan's phone rang incessantly. Friends, colleagues, and even his family demanded explanations. His attempts to clear his name were futile. Ethan's carefully planted evidence was airtight, leaving no room for doubt. The once charismatic and respected partner was now a pariah. Mia wasn't spared either. The same photos and messages Ethan had shared at the dinner party circulated among their friends. Her once spotless reputation was tarnished, and the whispers followed her everywhere. Invitations to coffee or casual lunches stopped. Friends who had once admired her elegance now avoided her altogether. Ethan, meanwhile, maintained his calm exterior. He showed up at work as usual, the picture of professionalism, but his cold indifference to Ryan spoke volumes. He had stripped Ryan of his role at the firm, citing trust issues, and initiated legal proceedings to dissolve their partnership. At home, Mia tried desperately to reach Ethan, but he refused to engage. Every attempt to apologize or explain was met with silence or a withering look. She slept in the guest room, consumed by regret and shame. The man she had betrayed now seemed untouchable, his actions calculated and precise, while her world crumbled around her. Ryan, desperate and cornered, finally reached out to Mia. We need to talk, he said over the phone. This can't be the end. But Mia, overwhelmed by the public shame and Ethan's cold rage, hesitated. I don't know, Ryan. Everything's a mess. We'll figure it out, Ryan insisted. Meet me at the hotel tonight. We'll plan our next move. Mia agreed, not knowing that Ethan had anticipated this moment. As she packed her things and prepared to leave, Ethan watched from the shadows, his next move already in motion. The revenge wasn't over. It was about to escalate to a level they could never have imagined. Mia arrived at the hotel, her heart pounding as she entered the same room where she and Ryan had started their affair. She found Ryan pacing nervously, his usual charm replaced by desperation. This is a disaster, Ryan muttered as soon as she walked in. Ethan's ruined me. My career, my reputation. Everything. Mia sat down on the edge of the bed, her guilt mixing with fear. He hasn't just ruined you, Ryan. Everyone knows about us now. I've lost everything too. Ryan knelt in front of her, gripping her hands. We'll get through this. Together. We'll leave this place. Start fresh somewhere else. Mia wanted to believe him, but a part of her knew this was a fantasy. The life they had destroyed wasn't something they could escape so easily. Ryan, I don't know if running away is the answer. Before Ryan could respond, the door to the room burst open. Ethan stood in the doorway, flanked by a hotel security guard. His face was unreadable, a mask of icy control. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Ethan said, his voice laced with venom. He held up his phone, revealing that he had been recording their conversation from outside the room. "I thought I'd let you dig your grave a little deeper." Ryan's face turned pale as he stumbled to his feet. "Ethan, listen." "No, Ryan. You listen." Ethan stepped closer, his calm demeanor more terrifying than any outburst. "You betrayed me, destroyed my trust, and now you're trying to run away with my wife? Do you think I'd let that happen?" Mia tried to intervene. "Ethan, please. Save it." Ethan snapped, his eyes cold as steel. "I've already filed a lawsuit against you, Ryan, for embezzlement. And Mia, don't think I've forgotten about your role in this. I've also filed for divorce. By the time I'm done, neither of you will have anything left." Ryan looked like he might argue, but Ethan raised a hand to stop him. "Oh, and by the way," Ethan added, smirking, "your little rendezvous is being broadcast live to a private audience. Smile for the camera." Mia and Ryan froze, realizing too late that Ethan had rigged the room with hidden cameras. The live feed was being shared with key individuals from their social and professional circles. Their humiliation was now complete. As Ethan turned to leave, he looked back one last time. "Enjoy your downfall. You've earned it." With that, he walked out, leaving Mia and Ryan to face the full weight of their betrayal and the wrath of everyone they had wronged. The aftermath of Ethan's public exposure hit like a tidal wave. Within hours, the video of Mia and Ryan's confrontation in the hotel room had spread among their acquaintances and colleagues. The humiliation was relentless and unforgiving. Ryan's life disintegrated rapidly. Clients who hadn't already left the firm severed ties immediately, and whispers of his alleged embezzlement reached the wider professional community. The lawsuits Ethan filed ensured that Ryan couldn't secure new work. He was drowning in debt, and the stigma of betrayal made him a pariah. Even his family distanced themselves, ashamed of his actions. Mia's situation wasn't much better. Ethan's divorce filing included evidence of her infidelity, painting her as the sole cause of their marital collapse. Friends she had once considered close avoided her, their loyalty firmly on Ethan's side. She lost photography gigs as word of her scandal spread, and her volunteer opportunities dried up. Everywhere she went, she felt the weight of judgmental stares. At home, Ethan made sure Mia felt the full force of his contempt. Though they still lived under the same roof as the divorce proceedings moved forward, Ethan avoided her completely. The man who once shared quiet laughter and late-night talks with her now treated her as if she didn't exist. His silence was louder than any words, a constant reminder of her betrayal. One evening, as Mia sat alone in the guest room that had become her makeshift bedroom, she stared at the divorce papers Ethan had left on the nightstand. The terms were harsh. She would leave with little more than her personal belongings. Her dream of a stable life with Ethan was gone, replaced by the cold reality of her own actions. Ryan, desperate and spiraling, reached out to Mia, but their conversations were now laced with bitterness and blame. The bond they had shared, once fueled by passion and excitement, had soured under the weight of their downfall. For Mia and Ryan, the realization set in. They had destroyed everything for a fleeting affair. And now, with Ethan orchestrating their collapse, they had nothing left but regret. But Ethan wasn't done yet. He had one more card to play, one final act to ensure they would never recover. Ethan's final act of revenge was as calculated as it was devastating. While Mia and Ryan struggled to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, Ethan worked behind the scenes to ensure there was no escape for either of them. His anger had transformed into a cold, methodical determination to destroy every last remnant of their reputations and livelihoods. Ethan had always been meticulous in his work, and this was no different. He gathered every piece of evidence he had collected, financial records, video footage, and personal messages, and compiled them into a detailed exposé. Then, he sent it anonymously to every major architectural firm in the city, professional boards, and even local news outlets. Ryan's name became synonymous with betrayal and fraud. He was blacklisted from the industry, his career irrevocably destroyed. For Mia, Ethan's approach was more personal. He reached out to her remaining clients and contacts, subtly revealing her role in the scandal. It wasn't long before her photography business dried up completely. Even community organizations she had volunteered with distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone so publicly disgraced. But Ethan wasn't content with professional ruin. He wanted Mia and Ryan to feel the depth of their betrayal on a personal level. Using the divorce proceedings, Ethan froze their joint accounts, leaving Mia financially stranded. He also ensured that the settlement left her with next to nothing. Her pleas for leniency were met with cold indifference. The final blow came when Ethan confronted Mia directly, handing her a letter. "This is from the landlord," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I've terminated the lease on this house. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live." Mia stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, please, I know I've hurt you, but this is too much." Ethan's gaze was icy. "Too much? You had no problem destroying my trust, my marriage, and my peace of mind. Consider this the price of your choices." As Ethan walked away, leaving her standing in the empty kitchen of the home they had once shared, Mia felt the full weight of her actions. She had lost everything: her husband, her home, her friends, and her future. And Ethan, the man she had once taken for granted, had turned her betrayal into a masterclass in retribution. Meanwhile, Ryan, now broke and alone, received a final anonymous message on his phone. "This is only the beginning. You'll remember me every time you hit rock bottom." Ethan's revenge was complete, leaving Mia and Ryan to face a future defined by regret and ruin. The weeks following Ethan's final moves left Mia and Ryan in utter ruin. Ryan had been evicted from his upscale apartment, his bank accounts drained by lawsuits and debts. His attempts to rebuild were met with closed doors and cold stares. Even his family, once his staunch supporters, had turned their backs on him. Alone and bitter, Ryan realized that Ethan had not only taken away his career, but had also dismantled the very foundation of his life. Mia, on the other hand, found herself living in a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. With no job prospects and no savings, she resorted to selling her personal belongings to make ends meet. She spent her days scrolling through job listings, her once bright future reduced to a series of desperate attempts to survive. The loneliness was unbearable. Her phone, once filled with messages from friends and acquaintances, now stayed silent. The social circles she had thrived in were closed to her, and the shame of her actions haunted her every waking moment. Occasionally, she would hear about Ethan through mutual acquaintances. He had become a rising star in the architectural world, his firm flourishing after Ryan's departure. He was dating again, though Mia couldn't bring herself to ask for details. The man she had betrayed was thriving, while she was barely scraping by. One rainy afternoon, Mia mustered the courage to call Ethan. She didn't expect forgiveness, but she needed closure. When he answered, his voice was calm but distant. "What do you want, Mia?" he asked bluntly. I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything. I know I can't fix what I've done, but I need you to know I'm sorry." There was a long pause before Ethan replied. "Mia, I spent months grieving for the life we had, for the woman I thought you were, but I've moved on. I hope you find a way to do the same." The call ended, leaving Mia staring at her phone. The finality of his words hit her like a blow. Ethan had closed the chapter on her, leaving her to deal with the wreckage she had created. For Ryan and Mia, the aftermath of their betrayal was a daily reminder of the price they had paid for their fleeting affair. And Ethan, having exacted his revenge, walked away from the past with his head held high, ready to embrace a future untainted by their deceit. As time passed, the consequences of their actions continued to weigh heavily on Mia and Ryan. Their lives were irrevocably changed, not just by the fallout but by the haunting realization of what they had sacrificed for a fleeting moment of passion. Mia's days became a blur of monotony and regret. She avoided mirrors, unable to face the person she had become. Her once vibrant spirit was dulled, her world reduced to the four walls of her tiny apartment. She often replayed her life with Ethan in her mind, torturing herself with memories of the love she had thrown away. Each night, she lay awake, the silence a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Ryan's situation was no better. Jobless and shunned, he spent his days nursing a bitterness that festered like a wound. His attempts to contact Mia became more frequent, but she had started ignoring his calls. Their shared downfall had fractured their connection, leaving nothing but resentment between them. One evening, Mia finally answered one of Ryan's calls, her voice weary. "What do you want, Ryan?" "I want to talk," he said, his tone desperate. "I can't do this alone." Mia sighed, her patience thin. "Ryan, we did this to ourselves. There's nothing left to salvage. You need to move on." "Move on to what?" he snapped. "Ethan took everything from us." Mia's response was soft but firm. "No, Ryan. We gave him the power to do this. We betrayed him, and now we're living with the consequences." For the first time, Ryan was silent. The truth in her words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Their relationship, once fueled by forbidden excitement, had become a weight neither could bear. As Mia hung up, she realized she had finally let go of the last connection to her betrayal. Alone in her apartment, she stared out at the city lights, vowing to rebuild her life, even if it meant starting from nothing. Ryan, on the other hand, sank further into his anger, unable to accept the role he had played in his own destruction. Their paths, once intertwined by passion, now diverged into isolation and self-reflection. Neither of them could escape the shadow of Ethan's revenge, but they would have to find their own ways to face the emptiness it had left behind. Months turned into years, and the storm Ethan had unleashed finally settled, leaving behind scars on all involved. Yet, in the stillness of their lives, each of them found a different kind of resolution. Ethan had built a life he could be proud of. His architectural firm thrived, earning accolades and expanding into new markets. The pain of Mia's betrayal, though once all-consuming, had faded into a distant memory. He had started dating someone new, a kind and thoughtful woman named Julia, who brought peace and joy back into his life. One evening, as Ethan sat with Julia in their new home, he reflected on his journey. He didn't feel triumph or vindication anymore, only relief that he had moved on from a toxic chapter. "Sometimes," he told Julia, "letting go is the most powerful revenge of all." Mia, now living in a small town far from the city, had rebuilt her life piece by piece. She took a job at a local art studio, teaching photography to children. Though her days were simple, they were fulfilling. She had learned to find peace in solitude and meaning in small joys. One day, while walking through a park, Mia came across a couple laughing together. Their connection so genuine it stopped her in her tracks. She felt a pang of regret but also gratitude. It reminded her of what she had once had and lost. She vowed never to take such love for granted again. Ryan, unable to recover from the weight of his choices, spiraled further into despair. His bitterness consumed him, and every attempt to restart his life ended in failure. He often replayed the moments that led to his downfall, haunted by the image of Ethan walking away from him at the hotel. Though he reached out to Mia occasionally, she no longer responded. He was truly alone, trapped in the prison of his own making. Years later, Ethan and Mia crossed paths by chance at an art gallery in the city. Ethan, there with Julia, was laughing at a shared joke when he saw Mia standing quietly in a corner, looking at a photograph. She noticed him and froze, guilt and longing flashing across her face. Ethan approached her, his expression neutral. "Mia," he said softly. "Ethan," she replied, her voice barely audible. "You look happy." "I am," he said simply, glancing back at Julia, who smiled at him warmly. "I hope you're doing well." Mia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm trying." Ethan offered her a small, genuine smile. "Take care, Mia." As he walked away, Mia stood rooted in place, watching him disappear into the crowd. She felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. Their story was over, and for the first time, she felt ready to let go. For Ethan, it was the closure he didn't know he needed. His revenge had been thorough, but his happiness came not from their suffering, but from the life he had rebuilt in their absence. For Mia and Ryan, the scars of their choices would remain, serving as a constant reminder of what they had lost. And so, their twisted web of betrayal finally unraveled, leaving behind only lessons learned and lives forever changed. Bye-bye.